Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
A group of 5 close friends, Dylan, Casey, Morgan, Josh, and Lex, planned a skiing trip deep in the Rockies over winter break. They were seasoned skiers and had been to nearly every resort in Colorado, but this time they wanted something different, something untouched. Dylan had found an obscure mention online of an abandoned ski resort called Whisper Ridge. No website, no address, just a few blurry photos and a vague location tag on an old skiing forum. Naturally, they were intrigued. They loaded up their SUV with gear and drove 5 hours into the remote mountain range. No cell service, just towering pines, rising cliffs, and snow so fresh it looked unreal. They found what looked like the remnants of a snow-covered access road and followed it for over an hour until they reached what remained of Whisper Ridge. It was exactly as the photos showed: half-collapsed ski lifts, a boarded-up lodge, and no footprints in the snow besides their own. But the slopes, they were pristine. The mountain was steep and blanketed with untouched powder. Dylan and Josh were already unloading their boards when Morgan noticed something off about the main lodge. One of the windows, despite being partially shattered, had frost on the inside, as though someone had breathed on the glass, but the others were clean. They brushed it off as an animal or a trick of the weather and started skiing. That first day was perfect. No crowds, no lines, just endless, silent runs through wild alpine terrain. But as the sun began to dip behind the trees, the mood shifted. The wind howled louder. Shadows stretched across the slopes. The air felt heavier. They returned to the SUV and camped in the back with sleeping bags and portable heaters, but none of them slept well. All night there were distant thuds like boots crunching snow and a dragging sound circling the vehicle. They all claimed to have heard it, but when morning came, there were no tracks, just smooth, undisturbed snow. Day 2, they ventured higher up the mountain. Dylan convinced them to try a run beyond the northern ridge, past a faded "Do Not Enter" sign nearly buried in snow. The slope there was sharper, but the powder was irresistible. One by one, they dropped down the steep face. But halfway through his descent, Josh hit something hard and tumbled violently. When the others reached him, he was out cold, face down in the snow. Underneath him, poking through the frost, was a rusted metal beam, jagged like a broken antenna. Lex said it looked like part of an old ski lift. But there hadn't been any lifts on that side of the ridge, at least not according to the maps Dylan had seen. They dragged Josh back to camp. His leg was broken, and he had a nasty gash on his temple. They agreed to leave the next morning, but that night something came closer. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the heater shut off. Then the lights, then whispering, faint, garbled, as if coming from inside the SUV. Casey screamed first. Morgan swore she saw a figure, impossibly tall, gaunt, with something hanging off its shoulders like old ski gear, peering in through the frosted rear window. It didn't move, just stared. Its face was smeared with black slush or blood. They couldn't tell. Dylan flung the door open to confront it, but there was nothing there, just the cold. The next morning, the engine wouldn't start. They tried their phones again, dead. Josh was delirious, muttering nonsense. It lives in the slopes where no sun touches. Over and over. They decided to hike out. It would be a long trek, but they were panicking now. Dylan led the way. They moved in silence for hours through snow that seemed deeper, heavier. At one point, they passed a strange structure buried halfway in a drift. A chairlift tower snapped at the top. Its rusted cables led nowhere. Then the wind picked up again, and that same whispering returned, closer, more insistent. Casey dropped to her knees, sobbing. She said someone was inside her head, begging, screaming, telling her to stay. Lex tried to pull her up, but the moment she touched her, Casey went limp. Her body twisted unnaturally and froze, as if something inside her had broken. Lex shrieked. Morgan turned and started running back toward the SUV, screaming something about the wrong mountain. Dylan and Lex had no choice but to carry Josh and keep moving. They didn't speak again until the sun began to fade. By then, they could see the tops of trees that marked the main road, but behind them, in the white blur of the snowfall, were shapes. Tall, gaunt, draped in ruined ski coats, dragging bent poles and rusted gear behind them. When they were finally found by a snowplow crew the next morning, Lex was alone, barefoot, covered in blood and frostbite. She was wandering in the trees, humming a lullaby none of the rescuers recognized. Her eyes were glazed, lips cracked, and all she would say was, "Whisper Ridge doesn't let you leave not whole." Of the others, only Dylan's body was recovered, buried beneath a collapsed ski lift half a mile away. His face frozen in a scream. Josh, Morgan, and Casey were never found. Locals say the resort was shut down in the 1970s after a massive avalanche buried part of the northern slope and took the lives of 14 skiers who'd ventured off-trail. Their bodies were never recovered. Some say if you ski too deep into the Rockies, you'll hear them calling, asking for help, or warning you to leave. But by then, it's already too late.
Story number 2.
In January of 2013, a ski patroller named Kyle Werner went missing during a routine sweep on Mount Elsum, a relatively unknown but legally operational mountain resort tucked deep in Washington state. The resort was small, just 3 lifts, 1 lodge, and a skeleton crew of 6 employees. The weather that day had been intense, whiteout conditions, 40 miles per hour winds, and thick, wet snow hammering the slopes. By evening, only a handful of skiers remained, and they were all accounted for, except Kyle. He had gone out on his usual closing run to check that all trails were clear and that no one was stranded. It was something he did every day without fail. When Kyle didn't return after an hour, his coworkers assumed he was dealing with an injury or helping someone off the trail. But then his radio went dead. The strange part? Before the silence, his last transmission was a whisper, static choked, but unmistakably frightened. "I think someone's following me. I see tracks. Not mine." The team immediately mobilized and began a search. They expected to find Kyle hunkered down somewhere, maybe injured or disoriented in the snow. But when they followed his route, Trail 7, a black diamond run that hadn't been groomed in over a week, they found something else: his skis. Both of them jammed vertically into the snow, standing straight like grave markers. A few feet away, his patrol jacket was lying on the ground, completely unzipped as if it had been removed carefully. No blood, no footprints, no sign of a struggle. Just his gear, left behind mid-mountain, and total silence. The snow continued to fall that night, and the storm worsened. Search and rescue teams were called in and combed the area for days. Avalanche dogs, drones, thermal cameras, nothing. The entire ridge was scanned and rescanned. They never found Kyle or any new tracks besides their own. Mount Elsum closed for the season shortly after. The official report blamed poor visibility, assumed Kyle had fallen into a tree well or down a hidden crevasse. But the mountain didn't have crevasses. No tree wells in that area either. Something didn't add up. A year later, a new crew was hired to prep the mountain for reopening. During equipment testing, one of the rookies, a guy named Eli, volunteered to do a sweep down Trail 7. They told him to stay off it. It wasn't marked as open. But he said he wanted to see what all the fuss was about. He never came back. This time, they found something even stranger. At the midpoint of Trail 7, in almost the exact same place as Kyle's skis, were 2 sets of gear. Eli's snowboard and boots, placed neatly side by side, and next to them, frozen into the ice, Kyle Werner's helmet, the same one he'd been wearing the day he vanished, with a single deep scratch running across the top like a claw mark. That was the final straw. Mount Elsum shut down for good in 2014. The resort sits abandoned now, its lifts frozen in time, the lodge caved in from years of neglect. Some hikers and thrill seekers still make their way up there, trying to capture a bit of lost history or to ride the forbidden slopes. Every few years, someone goes missing, and every time Trail 7 is the last place they're seen. Locals say the mountain takes people, that something ancient lives beneath the snow, something hungry, something territorial. Not a ghost, not an animal, something older than names, drawn to motion and heat and the rhythm of heartbeats. The ones who return, if they do, always say the same thing. They felt watched, not from behind, not from above, but from underneath.
Story number 3.
One winter, a group of friends planned a ski trip deep into the Rockies, somewhere remote and rarely touched by tourists. They were all experienced skiers, excited to test themselves on untouched powder and steep slopes, far from crowded resorts. The air was crisp, the snow untouched, and the forests surrounding the trails seemed dense and silent, almost too quiet for such a wild place. On the second day, they decided to tackle a challenging backcountry run recommended by a local guide, an unmarked trail descending through a narrow ravine shadowed by towering pines. The guide warned them to stay together and be careful of sudden weather changes. Eager, they agreed. As they skied down, the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long, unnatural shadows. The wind picked up, whispering through the trees like hushed voices. One friend, Matt, was slightly ahead, carving through the snow with practiced ease. Suddenly, the others heard a sharp yell. Matt had disappeared from sight. They called out, but only the wind answered. They hurried down, heartbeats pounding, scanning the steep slope and jagged rocks below. Then they found it, Matt's ski pole, broken and half buried in snow, but no sign of him. Panic set in as the sky darkened rapidly. They tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Night was falling, and they were miles from any help. With limited daylight left, they chose to backtrack cautiously, hoping Matt had somehow made it out. But the forest seemed to close in around them, every shadow twisting unnervingly. Strange sounds echoed, soft thuds like footsteps not matching their pace, and faint breathing that couldn't belong to any of them. Suddenly, the snow beneath Sarah gave way. She tumbled into a hidden crevasse, landing hard but alive. From the depths below, she glimpsed something that froze her blood. A pair of eyes staring back from the darkness, glowing faintly, unblinking. She screamed for help. The others helped her out, shaken and trembling. They pressed on, desperate to escape the growing sense that something was watching, waiting. As they neared the bottom of the ravine, they found footprints, barefoot and too large, cutting across the snow in no logical direction, vanishing into the trees. A scream ripped through the night air, chilling and raw. It was Matt, or what sounded like him, coming from deeper in the woods. They ran toward the sound, only to find shattered equipment and a smear of dark red on the snow. Blood, but no body. Frozen with terror, they realized the air was colder now, heavier. A shadow detached itself from the tree line, a hulking figure covered in snow and ice, with eyes reflecting pure malice. It moved with unnatural speed, silent yet deadly. They bolted uphill, the thing crashing through the forest behind them, knocking trees and rocks loose. By dawn, bruised and broken, the three friends reached a ranger station. But Matt was never found. The official search turned up nothing but the broken pole and the footprints. Some experts said they matched no known animal or person. Years later, the friends still hear his voice in the wind on cold nights, whispering warnings not to return. And deep in the Rockies, something waits beneath the snow, an ancient frozen terror that claims the lost and the foolish who stray too far from the safety of light.